Next, I'd like to invite David Rovics for a song. And I'd like to say, if listening to music was the same thing as activism, we'd have communism with the amount of David Rovics I listen to. So.
I was thinking I'd do one last optimistic song about the workers of the world, but in the past few hours, there's been several tower blocks completely destroyed in Gaza. I wrote this song 3 years ago. I heard them marching, chanting, "Kill them all." I saw millions of people trapped behind ghetto walls. I saw the soldiers shooting every Friday afternoon. I saw some exposed to sickness, others made immune. I saw the tear gas in Al-Aqsa, eyes open wide. I saw the mob attack the motorist and beat him till he died. I heard the generals whining. I saw the tanks moving in. I heard the settlers shouting, "Let the killing begin." Look up above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard the wailing voices of the dying and forlorn, of the kids who couldn't get out, and those who weren't warned. I saw all the schools and hospitals in pieces there still. From the last time the IOF came to maim and kill, I saw the brave children with piles of rocks facing tanks demolishing city blocks. What's left of the grove but some sap as they try to wipe Palestine off the map. Look up above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard the DNC and all the Republicans too pledge allegiance to Netanyahu. I heard the president start the story with rockets from a ghetto where people live in rubble, starved by an embargo. I saw a whole lot of crocodile tears on display for the zillionth time. I heard politicians say, "Can both sides please de-escalate?" On one side are the occupied, on the other an apartheid state. Look above, hear the ear-splitting sound. Watch the buildings crumble to the ground. See the planes in the sky there by the sea, so much like New York City. I heard them marching, chanting, "Kill them all." I saw millions of people trapped behind ghetto walls.
Guys. All right. Our next speaker is the real deal Holyfield, you might say. He studied Marxism, Leninism in China. He fought against ISIS in the Middle East as an airborne. It was airborne division, right?
No, it was YPG.
Oh, okay. Well, my bad. Anyway, he is a leader of the Party of Communist USA. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Chris Helali.
Dare to struggle! Dare to win! Dare to struggle! Dare to win! Dare to struggle! Dare to win! That's right, we're gonna win! Get ready! Get ready, comrades, here we go. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I know it's late, and I know everybody, after eating, drinking, relaxing, so I won't take too much of your time. But I'll tell you one thing, when I was thinking on my way here what I would say, and thinking about just recently having come from both Athens and Rome, from two major international conferences for peace and against imperialism, sometimes your speeches just write themselves. And so I want to tell you about what was published today in a very important media site for the communist movement. And it was published today, I think, not by accident, on purpose. because those watching our movement here, those watching not only our party, but of course the Center for Political Innovation, knowing that we work together, knowing that we are struggling against imperialism together, have published a hit piece.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's entitled The Anti-Communist Character of the So-Called World Anti-Imperialist Platform. Here we go. Here we go. And in it, I'd love to read this one part because I think this was fantastic. I looked. I said, where is this part where they're going to mention by name either of us? And they did. And they said in this paragraph, on the other hand, other organizations of a strange nature, participate in the platform, unrelated to the international communist movement. Some that even hold reactionary, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and openly anti-communist positions. Such is the case of organizations such as Vanguardia Española, the Center for Political Innovation of the United States, or the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Comrades, you can't make this shit up. You can't make this shit up. This, by the way, I'll tell you who wrote it in just a second. I gotta read you the next paragraph. But just for us now, looking around the room, anti-communist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, what madness is this? Grasping because they cannot critique our position. But what do they say? They say, on the contrary, the lack of a Leninist and revolutionary interpretation of imperialism leads the platform, of which CPI and PCUSA are both signatories, our party just becoming a member of, and soon CPI to become a member. The platform to conclude that Russia and China are quote-unquote anti-imperialist countries that must be defended from US imperialist aggression and thereby justify the Russian military aggression, not only in Ukraine, but also in Syria and other countries of the former Soviet Union on the one hand, and from China in Africa on the other hand.
Sounds like they work for CNN. Yeah.
Comrades, the comrade who wrote that, so-called comrade, is a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Mexico. Oh. Comrades, this party is openly hostile to not only CPI, but to our party. Why? Because they uphold this bizarre and illusory idea of a pyramid, an imperialist pyramid. And this ultimately leads them to conclude that every country has imperialist tendencies. Not only the United States, or Russia, or China, but Cuba, and Venezuela, and the DPRK. All of them have imperialist tendencies.
They're telling
This
us
is,
that we don't have a line.
I mean, come on, absolute madness. Absolute madness. So I begin tonight by referencing this because we're under attack. But we're under attack not because we're doing anything wrong, but because we're doing everything right.
Yep.
We are on the right side of history. We are on the right side of history. And I want you all to really understand that. We have taken a position that the Global South has taken. The Global South overwhelmingly supports Russia's special military operation. Why? Because they see in Ukraine the same enemy that also comes into their countries, that also sanctions them, that also occupies their land, that also sends foreign military troops to their soil, that seeks regime change of their popularly elected governments. The enemy is one, and the enemy is US, EU, NATO imperialism. That's the enemy, the only enemy today, and that's the main enemy of confrontation today. And so I want to speak about lines of demarcation. This was a theme of my speech in Athens, and I think it's really important for us to understand what the lines of demarcation are now for the international communist movement, but more importantly for the quote-unquote left. Because I think what CPI and what PCUSA are doing is correct. Branching out, looking at other political forces, popular political forces that might not necessarily come from an explicitly left or Marxist-Leninist tradition, but align themselves with the anti-imperialist aims that we aim for. And those can be nationalist movements, those can be movements for self-determination, those can be movements that are anti-systemic, anti-globalist, right? Seeking alter globalization. And so what we see are key lines. The first of which, of course, as mentioned there, was Syria. How many remember the start of the quote-unquote Syrian civil war? How many remember, right? The international left, especially many of the so-called comrades in the movement prior to that, botched it. They failed miserably. Miserably. Why? Because they once again looked and said, oh, this is a land grab and an imperialist game between the United States and its allies and the Russian Federation. What was Russia land grabbing? They already had a military base there for decades. All that they were doing, and they didn't do it on their own. They were asked by the legitimate government in Damascus under President Assad, we need your help. We need your help. Why? We're under assault. We're under attack. All of these forces that came out of nowhere, funded and armed through the Gulf proxies of the United States, by the United States, and most definitely supported by Israel. We know this is a fact, right? So once again, we got caught flat-footed in the movement, right? In the larger left movement, especially in the United States, caught with our pants down. Why? Oh, these other groups, they're saying it's an inter-imperialist war. This was the start of this whole thing, right? This is somehow an inter-imperialist conflict. Somehow Putin wants land in Syria. No, he doesn't. Putin wants stability. And Putin wants to support a government that is struggling to survive and to thrive and to provide for its people under a brutal assault, not only by the US, not only by US imperialism, but by Zionist aggression. As we speak today, Syria is under attack almost daily by Israel. Israel is bombing their airfields, their military installations, their sites. Why? Because of quote-unquote this Iranian threat. They're always making up, oh my God, Iran. Iran was fighting against ISIS. Did Israel ever say they wanted to fight against ISIS? No. What did they do? They provided humanitarian relief to ISIS fighters. They provided medical care to ISIS fighters. They never fired a single shot against ISIS. But now they have the bold audacity to claim that Hamas is ISIS. No, I'm sorry. Bad news for the Netanyahu regime. You are ISIS, actually. You supported ISIS. You look in the mirror, right? That's the first line of demarcation. The second line of demarcation, which catches us once again, is China. Oh, this is a big thing for the international communist movement now. The role and nature of China. What is China? China is socialist. China is state capitalist. China is openly capitalist. China is this, China is that. Comrades, all we have to do is be analytical and precise. The vast wealth in China is still under the control of the government, right? The banking institutions, the vast majority of the financial sectors, and the state-owned enterprises are still within the hands of the government and thereby the people, right? State ownership still is in command, right? But we have people within our movement saying, not only is China capitalist, China is imperialist. China's on a land grab in Africa. China's on a land grab in Latin America. China's on a land grab of its Asian neighbors. What do you mean? China constantly advocates for win-win diplomacy, for win-win economic cooperation. In fact, China's the one canceling economic debt, not the United States, not France, not Britain. In fact, France is still holding poor Haiti to account for its debt. For its debt. An absolute shame for a country that had enslaved the Haitian people, but was justly cast off by violence, right? You know? So I think here, once again, the left is confused, trying to figure out how do we understand China. Maybe China doesn't look like they want it to look, but the fact is simple. China, in its economic system, still has a socialist orientation. It is a plain fact of economics, right? We can disagree and say, oh, we would like a little bit more central planning. But that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that the Chinese economy is still geared towards the welfare of its people. We were talking here amongst comrades and talking about public transportation. Public transportation where? Non-existent in the US. We can't take a bullet train from the East Coast to the West Coast, from New England to Florida, from the coast to the center of the country. We have none of that. We have none of that because this government doesn't care about the people. It doesn't. We've been talking about that all day. It doesn't. But sadly, some comrades, quote unquote, still look at a country like China under imperialist aggression daily, with the threats of the United States surrounding it, and say, oh no, China's the imperialist one. This is unbelievable and quite saddening, to be honest, for people who we thought were good comrades and ideologically sound. The third line of demarcation, which I think is something a lot newer for us. I think many of the cultural and social issues that have plagued our movement, the identity politics, the woke quote-unquote politics, have caused tremendous strife. And they've caused international tension amongst various parties. Listen, comrades, not everyone in the world is on the same page. Not everyone had the luxury to go to Ivy League schools and to study critical theory, to study Foucault, Derrida, Deleuze, Judith Butler, and all the rest of them, and to have some sort of woke ideology about queer theory and things like that. The main thing is this. We should understand that countries around the world have their own cultures, have their own systems, and that progress happens not equal everywhere. It is unequal. Progress will happen. It always happens. We're always on the move, right, as a species. But we cannot then look to other countries and say, in Gaza, they don't have LGBTQ rights, so our default position is to support Israel that has LGBTQ rights. This is absolute insanity, but it comes from people on the quote-unquote left. This is appalling. I said, well, maybe if the Palestinian people in Gaza had 100 years of freedom and luxury and enjoying and freedom of traveling and good healthcare, maybe they could come to their own consensus about what they think progress is. Maybe they wouldn't. But leave it up to them. But they can only do it in a liberated situation, in freedom. They can't do it under occupation. And you can't hold them to the same standard, right? But we are surrounded by people advocating for this. We are surrounded by people in our movement saying, because they're not perfect, right? Well, again, the purity fetish. Because they're not perfect, they're not absolutely 100%, we won't support them. We condemn them. I don't condemn them. Why would I? If I was in that camp, I might put a vest on, right? What more do you have to live for, right? What kind of life will you provide for your family? Scraps of pita bread to give them, right? Dipped in tea. As one family, one man told the news reporters, what kind of life is this, right? The fourth line of demarcation, and this, of course, I think is something important for us to recognize. I think that a lot of us, a lot of the left, I don't mean us in this room, but a lot of the left got COVID wrong. I do. I think we have to have a conversation. I think we have to say that we don't have to be anti-vaccine. Many of our socialist, comrades in socialist countries have done amazing work in the biomedical field. But profits do not reign and do not command. People's health is in command, right? In our country, the same cannot be said, right? I don't think Pfizer or Moderna has my interest in mind, right? No. They see me not as a person worthy of the best medical care, but they see me as a dollar sign, right? And they see all of us as dollar signs. And they see some people maybe as expendable too, because that's just the nature of an economic system that puts profit in command over people's health and well-being. I think there is an argument, and I think that this will come through self-criticism in the coming years, over supporting mandates in capitalist countries. Socialist countries is a different story because there's a different mode and command in those countries. The people's interest was taken care of in a much different way than here. Here, it was stay inside, stay indoors, and we don't have anything to give you. Or we'll give you a pint. You're on your own. You're on your Wild West. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Figure it out. How are people going to figure it out? How are people in the city going to figure it out? People have to go to work. People got to provide, right? And then immediately after, all right, rent is due. Yeah. Well, wait a minute. I haven't worked. I've been out of work. Oh, here's $1,200 and see you later, right? I think a lot of groups, some very big parties in the US on the left, got it wrong. I think they got it wrong. I think the criticism should have been more to the workers, no stopping of work until you provide fully for the workers, right? The workers, the people need to be at the forefront, but their welfare wasn't at the forefront. Who was at the forefront? Oh, Operation Warp Speed. Yep. Pfizer, you need cash? There you go. Moderna, cash? There you go. Billions invested, right? I think there should be a serious conversation, and we've talked about this. Many great scientists like Salk gave these vaccine technologies for free. Yes. But why trust a technology that's top secret? That's, intellectual property. You can't access it, you can't know it. There's no openness about this. Whereas in other countries, that technology is open. Yeah. That technology is transparent. That technology belongs to the people, right? It's a line of demarcation, I think, that is still new. But philosophers and people like Giorgio Agamben have rightly pointed out, this was a state of emergency and the left got it wrong. They sided with the enemy. They didn't side with the working class. And the working class knows this, by the way. Many people in our movement have noticed where the trajectory has gone in terms of workers organizing. And it might not be to the place that we wanted. We could have taken them and said, under our banner, follow us. But some others took them, right? So we must be wary and self-critical about this, I think. The next line of demarcation, which I think is important for us to recognize, of course, now is Palestine. Now, after October 7th, we have Palestine at the forefront again. But once again, we have the parade of so-called leftists coming out saying, we condemn Hamas, we condemn all violence, we condemn everything. Wait a minute. How can you condemn everything? These people protested, right? The Palestinian people in Gaza protested. Do you remember when? 2018. Yeah, 2018, 2019, Great March of Return. Hundreds of thousands protesting. Please, we want our rights. Please. Can you hear us? We want our rights. Nothing. They were shot at. Thousands killed. They were shot at peacefully. And then all of a sudden when they go to armed struggle, everyone's like, oh, why didn't they try peacefully? They should have all been Gandhis. They did. It didn't work. What do you expect? It didn't work. You remember this whole quote about, your enemy has to have a conscience, right? We remember Kwame Ture, right? This famous quote. They don't have a conscience. People have been advocating for decades. We want our rights. They're not giving them. What do you think is going to happen? Violence is going to happen, right? But they wanted that too. A great opportunity to commit ethnic cleansing and genocide, right? They wanted it. They were waiting for it. Netanyahu was ready to go to prison. His government was ready to collapse again, right? We have to be aware of this. And in our movement, we have to come to terms with new realities on the ground. And eventually, the international communist movement, more broadly the left, has to come to terms with, is the two-state solution even viable anymore? What do the Palestinian people want? What can happen on the ground, right? This has become another line of demarcation. Some advocating the same classic, Oslo, Oslo, Oslo. Oslo was in the 90s. My students in my high school class were born a decade later. They're sitting there. There has been nothing. But there's been hundreds of thousands of new settlements and settlers, right? In the West Bank. Wonderful, right? They are moving in. So what two-state solution? This is something we have to come to terms with. And the last thing I'll mention is, at some point, we have to come to terms with what does patriotic socialism mean? What does it mean to be a socialist in a country that has an imperialist history, but that also has a progressive history? You can have two histories simultaneously, one in command and one below, right? Looking around, we have a tremendous history in this country. There should be nothing to be ashamed of. We're proud of it. In fact, the American Revolution, we have Aptheker's book back there, right? The American Revolution was a guiding beacon to so many others, right? It wasn't until I went to Cuba and I was at the University of Havana, I walked into the philosophy department, and as I was walking up, there's this beautiful painting of Simon Bolivar, and as I turned the corner towards Dr. Talia Fang, who just passed away a few weeks ago, an amazing philosopher in Cuba, and one of the leaders in the revolution on the philosophical side, there was a giant bust of Abraham Lincoln. And I thought to myself, you know that he might be canceled in the US. You know, he wasn't perfect. She said, we love him. We love him. Of course, nobody's perfect. Simon Bolivar wasn't perfect either, right? And to our standards. But they struggled on the right side of history at that time. They were on the progressive side at that time. That's how we judge them. We judge them. What would you have done at that time? And they stood against slavery for liberation. They stood for freedom. Okay, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't perfect, but that's progress. We don't hold those people to the same level as we do today. We have many more years of history under our belt. We have more theory under our belt. We've seen more things in practice. But they are heroic. They are people that are viewed by people in the global south as heroes. And so our movement has to come to terms with history. Our movement cannot erase history, right? There are over 300 million Americans. That history cannot be erased. That history can be understood in its context, but we have to have our own heroes. They are in our history. Not only Lincolns, but Debs and all of the other greats, the Malcolm X's, right? Huey Long, William Z. Foster, right? Claudia Jones, there are so many, Lucy Parsons, they're all there. But we cannot ultimately say that all of US history must be erased. That the US, by every standard, is just bad. It's not. It's a place where people live. It's a place where people thrive. It's a place where people want to raise families. And so this constant debate has to come, we must come to terms with it, and we must move beyond it. Because the groups that are advocating for a nihilistic approach, and this is the key, those groups advocating for a nihilistic or an anarchic approach that sees no history worthy of salvation, they go nowhere. They go nowhere. There is no mass movement behind them. Those that advocate for a progressive history and look for the strands of liberation within that history will be the ones that will carry the mass movement forward. And that's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with the fact that what we are doing here is honoring that tradition. We are honoring that tradition and we are fighting for it. Why? Because otherwise we have only annihilation in front of us. But we don't want annihilation. We want a world liberated and free where we can live in our communities here, where others can live in their communities in all the other countries, and we can live in friendship and we can live in peace. That's what we want. That's what we fight for. Dare to struggle! Dare to win! Dare to struggle! Dare to win! We will win. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much.